Hey, I just wanted to talk about something very prophetic that could indicate an end-time timeline, and this pertains to something in the news that's recently been announced, and that is that Rabbi Yehudah Glick is going to run for the office of the President of Israel, and that is coming in springtime, somewhere I believe around May. There's so many things that are incredible about should he run and win the office of the presidency. That would set the ball rolling for the end time scenario regarding the third temple in Jerusalem. As you know, Yehudah Glick is the one who has been part of the temple movement for years. He had been a director of the Temple Institute at one point. He's also been in the IDF and intelligence in the past. And he was the one person who was in the Knesset that was the representative of the people living in Judea and Samaria. And he lives in that area, in the Hebron area, where King David was king for 7 years in Hebron. Of course, the temple movement that he's been involved in is trying to bring about the building of the third temple. So to have him win the election and the office of the presidency would propel the whole prophetic events in such a fashion that we have not seen yet. Now remember, I reported back at Rosh Hashanah how Yehudah Glick took Robert, who could play the double shofar, to the Gate of Mercy, the Golden Gate, and Yehudah was standing outside telling Robert to blow the shofar, and he blew the shofar with him with some other people. But they were aiming the shofar at the Gate of Mercy, the Golden Gate, directly in the direction of the left side of the gate, because they know that Jesus the Messiah, Yeshua, rode through the left-hand side of that gate as the King of Israel, and it's been sealed until the time that he returns. But I told you that this gentleman that was over there studying archaeology, the rains had fallen pretty heavily the night before he took this walk around the gates. And when he got to the Muslim cemetery that's right in front of the Gate of Mercy, the Golden Gate, he completely fell through. The ground gave way underneath his feet, and he fell into this darkened chamber where there were skeletons, and he was able to film with the camera that he happened to have on him the arch that was the original gate, and that would have been the one that Yeshua rode through on the donkey. So that was pretty fantastic that that happened. He has the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, which is a foundation of peace. So he's coming to run for the president on that agenda of peace. And just many times he has prayed with the Muslims and tried to make peace with them. Now, I don't agree that they are worshiping the same God. So I was kind of shocked that he would do that, but he's trying to bring all religions to the Temple Mount area to have the, of course, one world religion there, but allowing all these people with different religions to come there. So this could set up for the end time scenario extremely fast. What's fascinating about the end time timeline is that the current president is Reuven Rivlin, who took office on July 24th, 2014. Presidents are elected by the Knesset for a single 7-year term. If Yehudah Glick becomes the president of Israel for 7 years, and he is trying to initiate getting the building of the temple accomplished, and he also is involved in, the sacrifices of the lamb at Passover and the offerings to God. He was initiating all of that. So he's very, very involved in the prophetic events. And now, with this 7-year timeline of the office of the presidency, that could really signal that we are close to the last 7 years of the time of Jacob's trouble. Considering that this person who becomes the president will be the president for 7 years, it's also interesting that the office of the president, he is the one who signs all laws into effect. Consider what this means in the prophetic words in Daniel, and how it says that there will be a covenant made with Israel for 1/7. I was listening to Andy Woods, and he stated that in that scripture about the covenant with many, he says the many is not the other nations, it's the many of Israel. So this person's going to sign this covenant with Israel for the 1/7, which is the 7 years time of Jacob's trouble, and then halfway through, that will be broken, that covenant. I also explained to you how the Lord had revealed to me about the word there, the covenant with many, being a lease. And I believe it's a land lease dealing with the Temple Mount, allowing the Jews to build the third temple. And they'll start the sacrifice and oblation, but when they break that lease with Israel, halfway through the time of Jacob's trouble, it will automatically stop the sacrifice and oblation because the lease will be broken. And that is exactly what the Lord had revealed to me that I saw, and it's actually factual information. It's not my conjecture. It's actually a definition of those terms. And I've also talked about how the king of Jordan has been leasing land to Israel in other places, and along the borderline with Jordan, and how he could be involved or he could be removed and taken out of the way, which will thus reveal whoever the Antichrist character is would be taking over at that point. Let me just read that prophecy, Daniel 9:27. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Now remember, I talked about how, remember Adnan Akhtar, the Turk, that had that little women's harem and all of this, and a lot of the Sanhedrin rabbis were meeting with him, and then he got arrested and put in prison and all of that. But Rabbi Yehudah Glick has been working with the Turkish government in the past, as well as the Turkish religious leaders, to gain Islam's approval for the building of a Jewish temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Yehudah Glick, along with other rabbis, He told these Turkish leaders that Jews and Muslims worship the same God and that the new temple will be open to all religions. Turkish imams all agreed that a new temple in Jerusalem will usher in lasting peace and prosperity for Israel and an era of peace among all the nations. In one other interview by the Turk, he had made the comment in front of the Sanhedrin rabbis that this new Jewish temple would be a mosque. And remember that the king of Jordan wants a 5th minaret built up there. As one Christian brother states, we may not be here to see this 7-year agreement signed. The resurrection and rapture and the tribulation are very near. It's high time to awaken and stay awake watching for the Lord. And what's fascinating too is that Yehudah Glick had wanted Trump to announce the building of the temple. And a bunch of the rabbis were hoping that he would read a letter to the world announcing that it was going to be built. But it didn't happen. Let me just read part of this article from forward.com about how they believed that the former president would be involved in the building of this temple. It says, some mystically inclined Jews see Trump as a sort of divine instrument within Israel's controversial Temple Mount movement, which Yehudah Glick is a part of, which seeks to build the third temple in the center of Jerusalem's old city. Trump has found vocal advocates who see him not simply as a political ally, but as something more. President Trump can choose to be a part of a process to bring the Messiah, Hillel Weiss told Breaking Israel News. When President Trump visited the Temple Mount, the rabbis were hoping that Trump would endorse their project. And they said, we hope that you will decide to go up to the Temple Mount, read a public letter from a group of rabbis known as the Sanhedrin. The group is a self-styled duplicate of a tribunal that convened during the time of the Second Temple. If you seek world peace, the rabbi's letter goes on, there is only one way to do this. Declare the raising up of the temple. Of course, this is unlikely to happen, but during the campaign, Trump enjoyed popularity in white evangelical and some Orthodox Jewish circles. Well, he has all kinds of nations and races of people that were his supporters. Of course, as we know, some compared him to the biblical King Cyrus, referred to in Isaiah as God's anointed one, who, though not Jewish, served the Hebrew God and aided the Jewish people. Trump was a decidedly non-religious candidate, the thinking goes, but one who was seen as still serving the interests of Americans on the religious right. Now it goes on to say, for Israel's Temple Mount movement, the comparison was even more explicit. In the Bible, Cyrus decreed that the Jewish temple in Jerusalem be rebuilt after the Babylonian exile. So they said, I hope that Trump will ascend the Temple Mount and from that source of light and energy in the world, lead us in a dialogue of peace and reconciliation. Yehudah Glick, who was then a Knesset member and leading figure in the Temple Mount movement, said this to Israel National News. Rabbis who are aligned with that movement are now saying that if Trump comes to Jerusalem and prays on the Mount, he will receive a blessing of Solomon given to foreign kings. When King Solomon completed the temple, he dedicated the building by calling on foreign kings to come and pray. Rabbi Dov Stein, also a member of the Sanhedrin, recently told Breaking Israel News, the proper place for a leader to pray is on the Temple Mount. If President Trump does so, he will receive this blessing. So at that time, this information stated that they wanted President Trump to ascend the Temple Mount and read a letter out loud to declare the raising up of the temple and to be part of the messianic process to usher in the Messiah of Israel. Now, I don't need to go into all of the things that people always say, yeah, but their Messiah is not our Messiah, and on and on. That's not what I'm getting at here. I'm just saying that we are very close to this timeline coming about. Now, remember, I told you that the former President O had formally stated something about that Israel could lease land for 7 years, and that was dealing with some land in Judea and Samaria. But what if that is the land lease that's signed with Israel so that they can build their temple, and they lease that property for 7 years, and then halfway in the midst of it they break the lease, which stops the sacrifice and oblation, which is, the offering up of the agricultural offerings. This really should send shivers down your spine, because, if Donald Trump had done exactly what they were asking him to do with this letter from the Sanhedrin to declare the raising up of the temple, that would have been an astonishing prophecy that would have been happening before our eyes. And if you remember Yehudah Glick in that film that I showed about Rosh Hashanah and how he went to Jericho and blew the shofar, and how Robert, the double shofar player, was blowing the shofar at the Golden Gate of Mercy where the Messiah is going to come through. Yehudah Glick was basically praising God there while blowing the shofar and saying, God is King. God is King. We declare that God is King. And proclaiming that his return is at hand. Yehudah Glick is the face of the temple movement. And he is obviously, when he runs for the office of the president, that is going to propel the temple beyond anything that's happened in 2,000 years' time since the destruction of the temple. And another thing is that the temple movement, which Yehudah Glick is part of, aims to build a third Jewish temple on the Temple Mount as part of a vision to replace Israel's ethnocratic parliamentary system with a monarchy based on Jewish law through the biblical land of Israel. And when Yehudah Glick was in the Knesset, they saw his entrance into Parliament as a major step forward. Yehudah Glick also founded the Temple Mount Heritage Foundation in 2009. And he is for Jewish freedom on the Temple Mount and human rights on the Temple Mount. And he wants the Jews to be able to go up there and worship on the Temple Mount. Noting one more thing about the President of Israel, he accredits Israel's envoys to foreign countries and accepts the credentials of foreign diplomats serving in Israel. He signs every law enacted by the Knesset and treaties and agreements with foreign countries that have been ratified by the Knesset. So the president would sign any laws into place. And could that include the covenant with many? And if the Knesset ratified it, he would embolden it by signing it into law, thus making it stronger and strengthening the law. So you see how it could all fall into place for the last 7 years of the time of Jacob's trouble. And if Rabbi Yehudah Glick becomes the president of Israel, how suddenly everything will catapult the third temple building to come about quickly and speedily. And I had the chills reading that they wanted President Trump to go stand on the Temple Mount and proclaim the raising up of the temple. Anyway, from reading those statements about how they expected Donald Trump to read that letter to the world, I believe that there's opposing forces that are trying to bring him down so that he could not accomplish that, so that it would prevent the temple from suddenly being built. And, the Lord says that we fight not with flesh and blood, but against principalities or powers of darkness. And that is what is opposing what is trying to progress God's plan. Another 7-year aspect that's very interesting that was in the news is they said that they believed that Israel would be finished dealing with the thing that's been going around within 2 months, but that all the other nations would be dealing with it for the next 7 years. So there you have 2 things that are in the future dealing with the number 7 years. And that is just really uncanny. When May comes around and Rabbi Yehudah Glick runs for the office of the presidency, and if he gets in, things could stampede very fast. And I truly believe that the Lord was showing all of these things coming together that are extremely profound. And I'm wondering to myself, is it possible that somehow they could put President Trump in some role that they have for him so that he could still announce it to the world and bring it about? Rabbi Yehudah Glick was very involved with trying to get the Passover sacrifice of the lamb up on the Temple Mount. For many years, that was the case. Of course, we know that true peace will not come until YESHUA, Jesus the Messiah, descends from heaven in the glory cloud and brings that Davidic dynasty back from the tribe of Judah. And that's another thing. Rabbi Yehudah Glick would be in the tribe of Judah because his name is Yehudah. And they are talking about doing away with that type of government and having a monarchy which paves the way for the King of Kings and Lord of Lords to eventually come. And eventually, God is going to open the blind eyes to see that He is the King. So these events are really shocking and stunning, and I just wanted to leave you with the thought that if this comes about with him becoming the president of Israel in springtime and setting him up for the next 7 years, how close are we to the appearing of the Messiah for the bride of Christ? That He's taken out people and redeemed them for a name for Himself out of all the nations. And He's coming back to take those people to be with Him where He is, as He promised in John 14. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, you may be also. He's going to take us in the twinkling of an eye. in the last trump. These things are extremely prophetic that are about to happen. And if you haven't heard this about Yehudah Glick running for the President of Israel position, and for it lasting 7 years, man, you've got to just be really awakened now, because truly profound things are about to happen, even though we've been in the midst of this really bizarre global weirdness that is going on. You know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to choose my words carefully, so sometimes I'm talking a little slow, but just think about what I've told you, and think about 7 years, and think about how he is the leading face of the temple movement, and about to rise to a position of the office of the presidency. Now he's got 2 other people that are running for that position come springtime, as well as himself. But he decided on Rosh Hashanah that he spent 2 days by himself pondering it, and Rabbi Yehudah Glick has decided that he is going to run for the position of the President of Israel. And I believe that that 7 years of his presidency would be the final 7 years that would set up for the monarchy of the kingdom of Judah, to which the Messiah belongs, and the Davidic dynasty returns. Thanks for listening. I hope you're blessed by this, because it really shows that the prophecy is rapidly, like a snowball down a hill, going faster and faster and faster, until we will see our King face to face in the glory cloud. I hope you're ready. Thank you so much for supporting me and my work in this channel, and thank you for your blessing. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't, and I thank you for reading my book, The Almond Tree, Aaron's Rod, the Messiah King of Israel, Divine Revelations of the Messiah for the Last Days. And we are almost at the threshold of eternity.